and welcome to the Oak Spring podcast, where we celebrate the legacy of Mrs. Bunny Mellon through the work of the Oak Spring Garden Foundation. I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Season 2, Episode 2. On this episode, we're going to be celebrating Black History Month with two guests. Later on in the programme, we're going to be hearing from the writer, educator and mushroom hunter, Maria Pinto. And before that, I'll be talking to Latifat Apatira, who is a visual artist who explores botanical printmaking in watercolours. But before we hear from our guests, I want to bring you up to date with some of the news from Oak Spring. And first of all, I want to let you know that the 2026 Residency and Fellowship application portal opens on February the 14th and will close on May 31st. That's 2025, of course. Also, our landscape team is dedicating these winter months from January through the end of February to pruning the many trees on site, especially the apple trees, of which there are now over 150 on the Oak Spring property. And we have a recommendation for you. If you find yourself in Palm Beach, Florida, earlier this month, an exhibition entitled Rory McEwen, A New Perspective in Nature, opened at 4 Arts. The show, which features several artworks on loan from the Oak Spring Library, is by Rory McEwen, the Scottish musician and botanical artist who worked throughout the mid-20th century. So a great opportunity for those of you who are in the area to see so many artworks from the Oak Spring Library. And now to our first guest. Latifat Apatira is a visual artist exploring botanical printmaking and watercolors based in South San Francisco, California. Latifat is a practicing physician, and her interest in printmaking emerged after taking a workshop on nature printing in 2019. She describes herself as a Muslim woman. My faith is embedded into my creativity. The intention behind my work is to cultivate an ever-deepening admiration for the wonder that is the botanical world. And you'll find a link to Latifat's website in the show notes accompanying this episode. And Latifat joins me now from San Francisco, on the eve of actually coming back for another visit to Oak Spring. We met last year, so looking forward to having you back here at Oak Spring, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're going to be talking about Black History Month, of course, on this month's episode. But let's start with a little bit of background about yourself, because you're a very diverse and talented woman. It's a long story. Your history, of course, is an interesting story in of itself. And I understand you're going to be writing your memoirs too, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But why don't we begin with a little bit of background of how you came about being an artist, a snapshot of your journey.
Thank you. So I am a physician by training, actually. So nothing in the creative artist realm, but I've always been a maker. I think I would describe myself, someone who is using their hands to make things, dabbling on Instagram and on Pinterest, thinking like, oh, I can make that. And I've always enjoyed that process of creating. But it wasn't until I took a pretty random workshop. It was just a workshop that I saw listed in a catalog in a place close to my house on nature printing, botanical nature printing, that everything really changed for me. So nature printing, I could describe what that is a ancient, centuries-old printmaking technique where an individual can take any natural object, and in the case of botanical nature printing, we use plants, apply a thin layer of ink on the plants, and then impress that plant's image onto paper or cloth or whatever substrate. I use paper. And it's amazing how much of the anatomical details of the plants remain apparent in the print. And I remember taking this workshop, and we hand colored with watercolor the inked prints that we made. And I was just blown away. I was like, this is so much fun. This is so interesting. And I was learning so much about, plants that I hadn't thought of, I hadn't known before. And that really changed the course of my creative life going forward. I was just hooked. I was addicted, and I've been making nature prints ever since. And that was first brought me to Oak Spring. I was so lucky and so fortunate to be granted a residency at Oak Springs where I can just engage in nature printing. And so, yeah, that's what I do with my creative self.
How much of your time then now is spent on your artwork, do you think? Do you do this every day?
So like I said, I was working full time as a physician, but about 2 years ago, I decreased it to part time so that I could dedicate more of my energy to creativity. So I do about half of my week at the clinic and then half of my week as an artist. I would say I touch something creative every day. Yeah. Or every other day at the very least. But it is a huge part of who I am.
Do you have goals to do this full time?
That's always the secret plan. I'm going to become a full-time artist. And I tell it to myself all the time. And I whisper it sometimes to my family. And they're like, yeah, whatever. Especially when I tell my mom or my dad, they're like, we sent you to medical school. What do you mean you're going to be an artist? What does that even mean? I don't know. Right now, no. I do enjoy the flexibility that having another line of work provides, in that I am not putting my rent or the food that I eat under the fire of I must produce art. I'm able to engage and create for myself in a way that's very freeing. And I like that. I may dabble in the future, maybe, but for right now, no. I'm happy being a part-time artist.
Well, as I said, so many things. And if I can quote from your own website, you're a Muslim woman, of course, a distinctive, visually apparent, a-spirited reality that illuminates and is hyphenated to all my other identities. Muslim woman, artist, Muslim woman, physician, Muslim woman, sister, daughter, plant enthusiast, Nigerian American. As a Muslim woman, my faith is embedded into my creativity. The intention behind my work is to cultivate an ever-deepening admiration for the wonder that is the botanical world. So do you find that fulfillment then in who you have become as an artist?
Very, very much so. I feel like it's allowed me in my role and my ability to express myself through art has very much been in line with my faith. And having that venue and that ability has been so calming and so refreshing in a way that I didn't experience before. And I really think was missing. That was the part missing in my life. I was happy just doing medicine, but not as happy as I am now. So, and not as fulfilled, nowhere as fulfilled as I am now. So, yes, I would have to answer that question. Yeah.
So this has become vital to who you are then?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot imagine going back to how I was before, not focused. I like I mentioned, I was always a maker. I was always doing things, but I was going from one project to another. I didn't really have any focus. I didn't have any expertise because I never stick with anything long enough. But nature printing has really opened my eyes in ways that I couldn't have imagined. Just the world around me, and that is guided by faith. I believe in God. And I believe God has created the universe for us to look at as signs of his majesty and his wonder and his ability to do absolutely everything. And so with every nature print, it renews my faith.
And now you're juggling both things and you're coming back to Oak Spring for another visit. I'm curious if you can share with us what you're going to be working on this time. But let's start with what you were here for before, when you were here at Oak Spring.
So yeah, my first time I came, I was working on actually the project that I am working on now, which was a series of botanical prints that I had already created in California that I brought to Oak Springs to watercolor. So I was spending much of my time watercoloring these prints, these inked prints. The second time I came to Oak Spring was for to print fall color. I'm in San Francisco. We do have autumn, but it's not the same as East Coast autumn. And I wanted to print the leaves, the gorgeous colors of leaves that happens in the fall. And I was able to complete a large scale print of many, many of the leaves that I found on the property of Oak Spring Garden Foundation. And I'm so happy when they offered to purchase the prints. So Oak Spring now has that actual original art that I created. And that was very, very exciting for me as an artist, as a budding artist, to be able to sell my work to such a notable organization.
Yes, and I have seen that, and it is beautiful.
This time around, I'm writing. I am putting on a literary hat and writing my memoirs on becoming an artist and some of the struggles that I went through in the process. So becoming an artist with the plants of Northern California. And these are the same plants that I watercolored my first trip to Oak Spring.
How does it feel to become an author?
Ooh, it's a lifelong dream. You know, I'm a voracious reader. I love books. I have amassed quite a library myself. And you know, when I was younger and I would go into a bookstore or a library, and I spent a lot of my time in bookstores and libraries in my youth, I would always think to myself that all of these people have written books. Why can't I write a book? And so this is a dream come true. I was very, very happy when I signed my contract with my publisher.
Well, congratulations. And I'm sure the time at Oak Spring will be valuable to the peace and quiet that you need to work on this book. And I believe you're going to be here for 2 weeks.
Correct. And 2 weeks in the winter. So I hope just to double down, maybe by a fireplace, drinking lots of tea and writing.
Sounds idyllic. Well, let's get to the Black History Month theme of this month's episode. Perhaps we can start by you telling us what it means to you that we do dedicate a month to Black history.
So my family's from Nigeria, from Lagos, Nigeria. My parents came in the 1980s as students, and my brother and I were born here. So I do consider myself African American, although because my parents are from the motherland, the culture is different. The culture that I was raised up as is different than African American culture. But I am really, really happy that we have a month that is dedicated to Black history. I mean, Black people of African American descent built this country. Seems only fair that we have a month to dedicate to their successes and their contributions, our contributions.
Absolutely. And of course, this Black History Month in 2025, I believe the theme is labor and what that has meant to this country. And that speaks to your point of the contribution that African Americans have made to the US. So talk a little bit more about how, not only what it means to you, but also how you might market yourself. Do you celebrate it in some ways? There are some gestures maybe that you commemorate this each year.
You know, I have to say that I probably don't do anything special besides just be myself. I, as a Black woman, as a Muslim woman, a visibly Muslim woman, because I do don the hijab, which is the hair cover, I feel like just being out in the world is a standard in itself. It's a label. And so I think that what I do is just try to be a kind, available, open human being. And especially in the circles that I I'm a part of, there aren't many African Americans or people of color, not in medicine, not in botanical art. And so I allow myself to be available for any questions. And I do get questions from other individuals who are, genuinely curious. And I'm always engaged and want to be engaged in conversation. But I wouldn't say I do anything in particular to mark Black History Month other than respect and honor some of the characters through history who have made life more accessible and honorable for African Americans in this country.
Do you utilize your social media?
I do utilize my social media. There are some groups that I appreciate and enjoy. There is one in particular, I'm sure some of your listeners have heard of her, Black Forager by that's her name, her handle. Alexis Nicole. She is a African American woman who has blown up on social media, has totally gone viral. And she's a forager and a botanist and educates people about plants that are edible to eat throughout the country, but also brings in that, some of the foraging rules and the harvesting rules and the whole concept of private property is based in colonialism and preventing African Americans in this country from accessing wild, free food as a part of maintaining some of the status quo that was in existence with slavery. So I really appreciate her and her advocacy. And she's just one of many people I follow on social media and interact with on social media that are speaking more loudly than I, perhaps, about the role of this country's history with Black individuals.
Well, that leads me very nicely to my next question. I was going to ask you if you have any role models, any mentors, any Black women out there that have, led the way for you and that you admire.
Yeah. So I would say my role models are my parents. I don't know if that's easy to say or not, but it's the truth. I mean, they came to this country as students. They had nothing, and was able to create a beautiful life for my younger brother and I. They gave everything they had to make sure that we had excellent education and grew up to be well-rounded and thoughtful and successful individuals. And they are both retiring this year from work. And I'm so happy that they are able to now maybe relax a little bit and enjoy some of the fruits of their labor. And yeah, they're just, they gave me such a good grounding in all ways that I think is important in my faith, in my education, in their encouragement of me, although not to quit medicine, it's not encouraged, but in their encouragement of me to do what I want to do and to strive for the goals that I have with their blessings.
Given your journey and your background, I'm wondering if it was for a Black woman an easy pathway for you, or if there's anything that life has taught you that we could do differently to recognize women and Black women, and maybe you're going to be a pioneer yourself with the work that you're doing.
I think there's always things that we can do better, right, as a society. I don't want to say that personally I've had a particular challenge. And I don't know if that is, it could be different reasons for this. If you speak to people who are whose families are from Africa as opposed to being African American, the experience in this country is different. At least I know it is for me and for my first generation, second generation African friends, as opposed to people who have been in this country since, the beginning. And so, what was the question? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm wondering, if given, your journey, if there's anything,
yes.
that you feel could have been done differently and make things more accessible for Black women and women of color.
Yeah, more accessibility in the terms of just having more of us around. It's hard when you're the only individual, right?
Yeah.
It's always hard. And it's hard when you don't have role models in the fields that one wants to explore. So I went to a magnet high school. There were thousands of graduates in our high school, several hundred in my graduating class, and maybe 6 African Americans. Medical school, there were a little over 100 individuals in my graduating class and 4 African Americans. I thought for a long time, for many years, that I was the only Black doctor at my hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard when you're the only one. I've gotten used to it. It's just the nature of, I guess, where I am in the country and the lines of work and experiences that I've decided to pursue. But it's difficult being the only one. And then now, as a botanical artist, in the local societies that I've joined, I'm the only one, a woman of color. Brown, Black women of color. So I think that perhaps being who I am and being here can be helpful for the next person who comes through, and hopefully seeing a familiar and friendly face can be of use.
I'm sure you will be inspiration for other women who are taking a similar journey, Latifat. And of course, by writing your memoir too, it will be chronicled. Your journey will be chronicled for all to see.
Oh, thank you. I really hope so. And I hope that it is not only a beautiful read, because that's what I'm aiming for, but also educational in many ways. It'll include a lot of information about California plants. So that is exciting, just educating people on the plants. But it'll also be inclusive in like I mentioned, my journey as a Muslim woman, as a Black woman, and as an artist.
Well, we look forward to having you back here at Oak Spring and wish you the very best of luck with your new book. Thank you for taking time to come on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. The pleasure is all mine.
And now to our second guest. Maria Pinto is a creative writer based in Quincy, Massachusetts. And as you will hear, she is passionate about all things related to the botanical and natural worlds, especially mycelia and mushrooms. During her time here at Oak Spring, she was working on a book to address some of the following questions. Can a Black American scientist taught truffle farming by Spaniards cultivate old world truffles in Virginia soil using mycorrhizal relationships with trees? And how do the fungi that zombify ants relate to the Haitian origins of zombies and their pop cultural mutations? Just some of the questions that Maria raises in her new book, and we'll also hear the significance for Maria of this Black History Month. Maria, welcome to the Oak Spring podcast. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I know you're busy writing.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. A pleasure to take time to chat with you today.
Well, we're going to talk about what you're working on in a moment, but as you know, this episode is about Black History Month. So I want to talk about what that means to you. Well, let's start with a little bit of background, because I know you've been to Oak Spring. So tell us about your visit to Oak Spring and what that was for.
Yes, so I am right now in the just stages of, I'm about to turn in a book that I was working on in Oak Spring, which is a collection of lyric essays all about the sort of proverbial hunt for different mushrooms. It's a book that has been brewing for a while, and I did so much of the work at Oak Spring. I'm about to turn that in. The due date is at the end of January, so I've actually been thinking a lot and reflecting about my time at Oak Spring and how much the place actually shows up in the book.
Okay, so you will have turned it in by the time this episode goes to air. You will have breathed a big sigh of relief, I think, by that achievement.
Yes, absolutely.
It certainly is an achievement. Well, congratulations on that. I want to talk a little bit more about your background, though, Maria, because it's a very specific interest that you have in mushrooms and mycelia. How did that come about? Were you the curious child who was always digging in the garden?
Absolutely. I grew up sort of back and forth between rural South Florida and the hills just beyond Kingston in Jamaica. My grandmother's house was a place that I would go back every summer. I'd spend the entire summer there until I was in my late teens. And, growing up in a situation like that where there's fresh food straight from the ground every day on the table, I brought my love of that everywhere I went throughout my life. And, as like a sort of feral child running around in the swampland on my family's acreage, that definitely continued. But then I got a little bit divorced from the land, I would say, when my family moved to the suburbs. And everything was very manicured and, I think I just, got the usual, driving in a car everywhere, not really walking at human speed, essentially. And then when I went off to college, I sort of fell in with a crowd that would, hippies and anarchists and people like that who would go out and they'd have skill shares, and stage herb walks and things like that, foraging walks. But it wasn't until I was living sort of a past life up here in the Boston area in a suburb where a Polish friend of mine shared her love of mushroom foraging in the form of having these parties where she would just give away just paper grocery bag after paper grocery bag filled with hen of the woods mushrooms, all of these beautiful mushrooms, the likes of which I'd never seen before. And I think it really took fungi to make me a little bit obsessed and send me down several rabbit holes around mushrooms, not just for culinary reasons, but eventually I realized that they're doing such interesting and exciting things ecologically that I had no idea about until I started to delve a little bit deeper, even past their culinary merits. So, it's a circuitous route to mushrooms and the study of them, but it does sort of make sense if you look back on my history.
So when you were younger, or do you still have an interest in actually growing mushrooms and exploring new, because there are so many varieties, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. I think, less of a cultivator. I definitely don't have a cultivator's instincts. Like, I'm not big on I like to joke with my mother, who is the one in my immediate family who has a green thumb. She takes care of many orchids, that, she got all of that sort of in our family. She sort of hoarded that ability to take something from seed or spore to fruition. It's really generally been about the hunt for me and being out in the natural world, and looking around and sort of being surprised by what I might come home with. Um, but yeah, it is interesting to think about those differences.
Did you dare to taste them and see what you could eat without getting a bad stomach?
Oh, I have always been so cautious when it comes to eating any wild food. I'm actually a lot more afraid of wild plants, of foraged plants, than I am of mushrooms, because I think because in our society, in the US anyway, we have what some people know as a mycophobic society, and we sort of look at mushrooms with a little bit of suspicion. I think I had a healthy dose of that going into the hobby, so I was pretty cautious with everything. I always forage something several times before actually consuming it. Um, and I was very lucky in that I immediately fell in with experts who I could send, images and descriptions of where I'd found things that I, had an interest in eating in the future, and would always confirm with them several times before anything ever graced my table.
Were you a brave child then? Because it sounds like you had an inquiring mind, or continue to have an inquiring mind, of course. But as a child, when you were exploring this topic, were you one that would really poke around in the undergrowth, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very much what friends recently have lovingly called a swamp rat. I was out there in my wellies, digging in the mud. I had, since we were on so many acres of farmland, I could just sort of run wild, and I would do things like catch minnows in a pond and transfer them to a little above ground kiddie pool, that my stepfather didn't really appreciate, because it was like basically standing water that would gather, mosquito larvae and stuff like that. So he didn't really love that iteration of my inquiringness. But yeah, I would, catch insects and stalk after, you know, um, whatever it was, whatever wild animals and some of the farm animals that we kept also. I was always out there getting dirty, getting, my hands in the soil and seeing what was around, playing with palm fronds, that kind of thing.
And how did this lead to your work into doing this professionally? Because, and as a writer and being your chosen subject, because it is a relatively narrow market, so to speak. But how do you commercialize that then, Maria?
Yeah, so I am one of the sort of lucky ones who didn't start out with a view to really mixing this hobby with money in any way. It came about because, well, there are a couple of different places we could go with that. Initially, I was going out and sometimes I would join groups of especially Black and brown femmes and women up in the Boston area who wanted to go out into sort of outdoor spaces without fear and, feeling like strength in numbers. And it was during one such hike with an organization known locally as You Good Sis. They no longer exist, but they were doing hikes for a while in some woods that are local to me here. And it started with me just sort of noting actually a mycoheterotroph, a sort of plant that has a parasitic relationship with fungi, known commonly as the ghost pipe, I believe. I was explaining sort of the ecology of that plant to a group of people on one of these walks when one of the walk organizers said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing that, leading your own walk, um, in this same woods at, some later date?" And I was interested, it turned out, and that kind of snowballed to the point where, folks were asking me to lead walks for their organizations, and private groups would come to me looking for that sort of thing. Um, and I will say that I was a little bit reluctant initially to go that route because um, for me, going out into the woods was a way to a little bit get away from people and to have my own time, just sort of me and the canopy. And this was sort of never on my radar, but I realized that it was a thing that folks were really hungry for. And actually, a lot of this was unfolding just after lockdown, amidst the pandemic, and folks were realizing, wow, there's this whole outdoor world. I've been trapped in these four walls for so long. There's this whole outdoor world that I know relatively nothing about. And so folks were really coming into an understanding of what it meant to sort of connect to the land in a new way post lockdown. So all of that kind of stuff just, I think, fueled me being called to sort of do this thing that I never envisioned as anything more than a hobby that I was extremely enthusiastic about.
So what are your long-term goals and ambitions then, Maria, with this work? Is it to create more literature on the subject and to do more research?
Yes, absolutely. I think this is a really exciting time to be both a writer and someone who has been making inquiries into, the ethno-mycological world, how people around the world have used mushrooms, across the ages. One thing that I learned in researching certain aspects of the book was that histories of mycophilia, the love of mushrooms, have been buried in various places, like sort of scattered throughout history, and there is not really a reliable sort of historiography of science around things like, bush medicine and stuff like that, places where I might look to see how my ancestors in particular worked with mushrooms, if they did. So it's been really fascinating to see the gaps in our knowledge and the ways that has driven us to talk about mushrooms and mushroom ecology, fungal ecology, much less cookery, right? So there's a lot of info to sort of collect and to synthesize, and getting a sneak peek of that, or getting into the nitty gritty of that with the book feels to me like just the start. I think it's super limitless when it comes to where you could really go with it, because mycology itself is sort of an understudied mega science. David Hawksworth, a British mycologist, famously said that of this, kingdom of life that is so integral to all of life that we know so little about. But then also the histories of the ways people have used fungi in conjunction with their use of plants, etc. Definitely something that needs to be studied more as well.
It is indeed a vast subject, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So lots of possibilities for you to explore in the future. But I want to come back to our theme this week of Black History Month, if I may, Maria, and contextualize that. What it actually means to you, a woman that was raised in Jamaica, a Jamaican origin. Tell us a little bit about what that feels to you. I mean, how you embody that and how you find your place in society, the prejudices, obviously, that are all too often in society, and making your way as a young woman. Where does Black history and this Black History Month, where does it fit with you? What does it mean to you? And how do you, in your own way, promote it?
Yeah, great question. I think that one thing the research for this book really taught me is that Black history, as we've been studying it, as I certainly studied it, coming up mostly in the US, has obviously been incomplete, to say the least. And also, we've taken it as an adjunct to Eurocentric histories when there are full and robust whole, universes of information about African nations, African people, African histories, and diasporic histories and stories that we hold ourselves as a people to sort of mend some of the wounds of the transatlantic slave trade. There are just so many hidden histories. There are so many things that get subsumed in dominant narratives by victors, that it's actually so inspiring to realize that, for instance, if I'm looking up a source, say a natural history of Jamaica, and I realize that there was an artist who, was responsible for making these incredible botanical illustrations, who a lot of botanical illustrations don't actually get credited throughout history, but this particular illustrator was so prolific and his images were so incredible, and he was of Caribbean origin, and he had like an sort of an interesting eye for the art form. I never learned about this particular fellow before I was delving into this research, and he's basically a footnote in someone else's long form story. And the minute I'm not going to recall his name right now, obviously, but the minute I actually went into the archives and did some digging and found out more about him, I was like, wow, I would never have heard this guy's name had it not been for where my research took me. So Black history for me lately especially has been just unearthing stories that are inspiring and that are, I think, just instrumental in stitching together an identity from, scraps. It's heartening work. It's inspiring work. It definitely makes me feel like the work will never be done, because I know there are just reams and reams of similar unearthings to be made.
Do you have any mentors or role models that inspire you till today? I mean, even from history or any current mentors.
Yeah.
Curious, because I think this molds us so much, and certainly in our culture as well, and is very relevant, I think, to this topic.
Yes, absolutely. So one mentor that has been a through line in both in my writing life and in the sort of study, the mycobotanical study, is Jamaica Kincaid. Caribbean writer. She also came over to the States when she was very young, and just loves plants so much. is a great lover of um, the natural world in general, but also of gardening. And just her succinctness and facility with language was something that spoke to me when I was younger. Her book, The Autobiography of My Mother, was one of the first times I wept while reading a book as a young adult. Yeah, she's just incredible. Another current mentor, I would say, is Ross Gay, whom I had the pleasure of meeting while at Oak Spring. Ross Gay, famously writes about joy and delight. And I think that is so essential in these very trying, rough times to be able to connect with both of those things. He's also a lover of the natural world. He's also a lover of gardening. These are the two people that really come to mind right now. But yeah, there are just so many people who I could cite as inspirations. A lot of really great folks doing incredible work.
And what do you consider to be your role, say, during Black History Month, when there's such a focus on the Black community, in terms in history, in terms of your contribution to literature as well, and your role, I think, in society going forward? Do you feel you have an obligation to promote it? Is there any way that you feel, obliged to take a role in it?
Yeah, I think the work is never over. I think it's wonderful to be able to highlight the contributions and achievements of people, of Black folks and communities during February. But I think one thing that would really serve to correct a lot of what I see as holding us back from working together across race, across creed, across all of these distinctions, is this idea that there are discrete moments when, it's all or nothing now. I think spreading out an understanding of and rebuilding our historiography, which I think is a little bit broken, frankly. I think spreading that out throughout the year and understanding that it's great to have a focal point, but it's also so essential for us to be thinking about ways to link the history, all of our many shared histories as, people from the United States, as people who share a world with others, but to be able to link all of it together. I think one of the problems that I see moving forward is this sort of wanting to isolate things and wanting to silo information and ideas, and then sort of wanting to forget about them for the rest of the year. I think mending that notion that we can be done with something as big as Black history is one of the most important first steps. And as for my role, I just hope that I can continue to sort of highlight the incredible contributions of Black folks from around the world, Black and brown folks working in tandem, throughout history. I have really been inspired to see that, I went into the writing of one particular essay in this book worried that I would not have much to say. I wouldn't find much when it came to Caribbean mycology in specific. And I was so wonderfully, thoroughly proved wrong and realized that there wasn't going to be enough room in that one particular essay to go into it all, that it's made it very clear that there's so much information out there if you just know where to look.
And you do raise, I understand, a lot of very interesting questions in your new book, which has an interesting working title: Fungi, Blackness and Survival, Fearlessness, Sleepiness and Deathless. Correct me there. This is a working title for your book, so put me straight on that. Exactly.
Yeah, so Fearless, Sleepless, Deathless, a fungal lens on hidden histories, blackness, and survival. It's a mouthful. It's definitely a working title. But Fearless, Sleepless, Deathless, that first part is the way that Ralph Waldo Emerson actually described the spore, but not only the spore, but the artistic process. And I just love that so much as a distillation of both things. This, a spore is the seed, the germ of a fungus, and it is so resilient. It survives drought. It can move through space. It can be in, gravityless, airless situations and still find a way to fruit this beautiful organism at the other end. And when Emerson was talking about that, he saw, of course, him, the resiliency of humanity in that, but also specifically of artists, to be able to go through adversity and still be able to fruit on the other end, this lush, fecund thing. And yeah, I just love that idea that this, this fearlessness, sleeplessness, and deathlessness, this immortality, could apply to words as well. I don't fool myself into thinking that's necessarily true, but I think it's something beautiful to aspire to.
Well, that really has whet everyone's appetite, I think, to look out for this book when it does come to our bookshops in the very near future. Hopefully, will it be published this year?
It will. It will hopefully be coming out, if all goes to plan, in September of 2025.
Fabulous. Well, congratulations on that, Maria. And I hope you'll come back and see us at Oak Spring.
Absolutely. I plan to.
Wonderful. Well, the very best of luck with your writing, and take care. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And that's our episode for this month. Don't forget, you'll find links in the show notes to our website at osgf.org. You can also subscribe to the Oak Spring newsletter by emailing programs@osgf.org. Do follow us on social media. We're on Instagram at Oak Spring Garden Foundation, on Twitter at Oak_Spring, and on Facebook at Oak Spring Garden Foundation. And if you've enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll share it with someone you think might enjoy the show too. You can find the Oak Spring podcast on any podcast app. My thanks again to our guests this month, Maria Pinto and Latifat Apatira, and to you for listening. I'll be back next month when our topic will be building community, so I do hope you'll join me then.